Bren, we can't hear you if you're there.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Yep, good morning.
All right. I am going to start us off. I'll officially call the meeting to order. And if we could rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'm going to open up the meeting and go right to the follow-up items that were asked that we listed from Wednesday and Thursday. And Jared is going to come up and go through those items.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning, Jared.
Good morning.
Morning.
So on Friday, I sent you all an email with a bunch of attachments that were responsive to some questions that you had during Wednesday and Thursday last week during the hearing. So I just want to go through those quickly and see if you guys have any questions on that. So I'll go in order of the email. The pension ADEC included the presentation that the actuaries did. And to go along with this, I know, Nancy, you had a question about the Board of Ed pension piece, and that's rolled into this. And I did receive an email from the actuaries confirming what the amount was that the Board of Ed would have to pay, and it was, as I mentioned last week, it's $505,000 less than what they had budgeted. The recreation revolving.
Hey,
the revolving fund.
hey, Jared, on the pension, just to go on the record here, the report that you've given us and everything, that's the final report that's been accepted by the pension committee, and we're all set there. We don't have any moving pieces at this point. Can you just confirm that? I
can confirm that, yes.
Okay.
And one thing that I wanted to point out is that this is the first, this will be the first actuarial valuation that includes the lower discount rate, which the retirement board approved last year. So we went from 7% to 6.9%. So this is the first valuation where you're seeing that, the effect of that.
And Jared, the OPEB, when is that due for evaluation again? I know you said every 2 years, so is that next year or so? So we'll get new.
So next year, yeah, beginning of next year, January, February next year.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Recreation revolving fund. There are details attached in two of the documents. One's the revenue, one's the expenditures from the fund. I don't know if there's much to say about that. There's a balance of $951,000. It accumulates revenue over time, and then it gets spent down to to $200,000 is the limit by October.
Yep.
And then if there is, by the policy, if there's money left in there over $200,000, it's supposed to go back to the general fund.
Yep. Thank you. For me.
You're welcome.
Thanks.
There was a question about the senior and disabled tax credit, page 1 of the budget, which has the calculations for the mill rate and the other projections. It includes $4,444,886 in revenue loss related to the credits. That's both there's a state portion and a local portion, and that's both of those. And that number is based on the experience of this year and what we saw there. It was actually ended up being more than what had been budgeted for this year. So we reflected that increase that we're seeing. the Police Outside Jobs Fund, we've talked about this. There's a document there that has the balances over the years, and as I mentioned last year, they began to see some growth in there, and the balance in the fund has accumulated, which is why we're bringing this up now, because you know, there should be some action taken with that. And as I mentioned in the email, the money strictly in the past has gone to pay for the officers and the duties that they perform on job sites, you know, whether it's for a utility company or a college or whoever is requesting their presence there for safety and security.
Yeah, what I would recommend, first of all, thank you. Second of all, you know, this is a happy problem to have. And third of all, it's something that came up from discussions that happened at the Board of Finance 3 or 4 years ago about how the rates to charge third parties were developed. I would recommend that moving forward, we put a policy together now that we've established this, similar to a policy that we have in the Park and Rec revolving fund, that is, you know, in this instance, and I'm fully supportive of using the excess funds to acquire the police cars. I think that's funds that are developed through this should go towards the police department, particularly when it's our cars and the like that are used in these third-party engagements anyways. It's our cars, it's our uniforms, it's our admin costs. So the funds going back into the police department budget make a lot of sense to me, but there should be a policy put in place as we move forward. It's a happy problem to have.
Yeah, I think that,
Sure.
I just want to echo that support. I think that makes sense.
All right. Next, we've got the other special revenue funds and governmental funds. There's a one of the attachments had the list of all those funds and the status of each one of them at the end of the audited status of each one of them at the end of last fiscal year.
Okay.
So the DPW and Parks, Frank did a crosswalk so you can see exactly what the difference is in the budget. I can talk about this one quickly. If you look at that document, you see we started with what the DPW budget was in 22, and then we're breaking it out by each of the what the proposal or what we've done, the DPW in 2023 and Parks in 2023 to come up with a total. So what's in the budget now is the DPW 23 and the Parks 23, those two added together. And so if you take that total, the column in black there, and compare it to 22, that's the difference in the last column. So it gives you the you know, a full look, apples to apples look at what happened to their budget between this year and what we're proposing for next year.
Okay. Thank you.
Penfield budget, there were some questions. You know, Selectman Flynn had some questions about the staffing levels, hours, pay for seasonal and part-time at Penfield. And so Anthony went through and kind of sharpened the pencil and went back to his staff to take another look at this and was able to find some savings there, which I'll get to that later on too when we talk about some potential changes to the budget.
Thank you to you guys and to Anthony for going back.
Sure. Insurance estimates, I did go back and talk to our consultant. The property and the E&O and liability are the estimates that come from them. And as of now, as of the end of last week, they weren't seeing anything that would indicate that we should be changing the amounts that we put into the budget. So we're comfortable with that, with the premiums the way they are now reflected in the budget for each of those categories. Earlier today, I sent you some information on cemeteries.
Yeah.
There's a PDF document on the cemetery upkeep, which is essentially the landscaping of them. And the total amount that we spend is about $12,000 in upkeep, just over $12,000. That includes 30 weeks of mowing and other cleanup. In addition to that, in the parks budget, there is in there about $6,000 approximately for headstones and any kind of repairs like that, not related to landscaping.
And Jared, this is something that, you know, you and I have talked about, and I was able to bring up with the first select woman as well. It's not large dollar amounts. Nobody lobbies for this, or it doesn't get lobbied for hard. But it is the heritage of our town, so I think it is important that, you know, going forward, we have somebody that's in charge of really managing this and paying attention to this, so that and it's not that people aren't doing their jobs. It's just that on the list of, you know, 150 priorities, this continues to fall down on that list. And I think we need to, before this gets into a state of disrepair that's unrecoverable or cost a lot of money that people don't want to spend on it, we need to pay some attention there.
Yep, we agree, and thanks for bringing this to our attention, and we will definitely continue to talk about it and follow up. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
And I think that's it, unless you have other items. Frank, Budget Director, also sent to you the legal services breakdown this morning, as he spoke about last week.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. Thank you. And it's just good to have, you know, in the book. So I appreciate that.
Sure.
I also want to
Any other
comment.
questions?
Well, yeah, I just want to comment. I was able to speak with you on Friday, you and Frank, and basically based on my going through the book and having some time outside of hearings to review some of the detail, yeah, ask some questions and make some observations. And I greatly appreciate the time and effort that you guys went through, and the administration as a whole went through in the entire budget process, but in particular going through and kind of following up on not just the items you went through, but on my other items. So thank you so much.
Yep, thank you, and we appreciate your input.
You learn anything, Tom, we should discuss here?
You know, Nancy, yeah, actually, and my apologies, the FOI rules and all that don't allow
Of
us
course,
to,
I understand.
to chat. So I'm not
Of
trying to
course.
blindside you or anything.
No, that's,
I think Jared's going to go through a bunch of items that were follow-up items that perhaps allow us to make some adjustments here. So I'll defer to him since they did all the work after, you know, I had some observations and they had some observations. So, you know, and Jared, I guess, and Frank can step us through it.
So thank you, Tom. So I was just about to say that based on some of the questions that happened over the course of the 2 days during the hearings, and then there was some follow-up from Mr. Flynn to our finance department, the administration has come up with some items to be adjusted in the budget, and I'll have Jared bring up those items next. And then I'll come back up after those items are presented and discussed. And then what we'll eventually do after I come back up and ask if there's any items from either of you, and then I may offer, I have something I want to offer, and then what we'll do is go through all of those items. Either we can take them up as a group to vote to amend the budget, or we can take them separately. So I'll bring Jared up now so that he can talk about the items that we identified due to the input.
Hey, one thing, Madam First Selectwoman, and Jared and Frank, you guys might want to post the materials that you sent to Nancy and I to the website so the public can see it. That's been typical in past budget years. So those follow-up items, you're going to want to post those so that members of the public can take a review of it.
Yes, we will do that. I'll take a look. I don't know if Jen Carpenter may have done that with the first batch, but if not, we'll double check and make sure that happens.
Great.
She did.
Thank you.
Okay, so there are a few different changes that we would recommend, and so I'll start with one is in the police department, and it's for the crossing guards. As you may know and has been discussed, the crossing guards line item has been moved to the Board of Education. In the budget document that was before you, that we didn't reflect that, so we need to make that change. So it's a reduction in spending. It's $159,230. And again, that's just the police and the Board of Ed spoke and thought it would be better to run that through the Board of Education budget. Any questions on that?
No.
Okay, so I just want to point out what you've just said, and I'm stating the obvious in a simplified way. So that's 159 slightly plus expense that's being removed from the town side, but the Board of Ed is now assuming that extra expense, which has not been previous practice.
Correct.
Just to be clear. Okay, thank you.
Okay. There was, next item is the Emergency Communication Center. This was a complicated thing to do to put this into a new independent fund. And so in the process, there was a typographical clerical error, and so we're making an adjustment here. Again, this one is to the good of the budget. It's a reduction in the general fund side of $28,639.
I thought it was five. Oh yeah, 639. My apologies. Bad eyes. Go ahead.
Okay. In the information technology department, we went through many, as you might imagine, internally, we went through many iterations of different budgets and changes. And one of the things that happened along the way when we were attempting to find some reductions was we reduced a capital outlay item for data storage for IT. Originally, it was in the budget at $75,000, and we had reduced it to $25,000. Later on, especially when we got the new pension number, which was better than we had anticipated, what we want to do is add back the $50,000 that we cut out of there, because the 25 remaining doesn't really do anything for IT. They need to have a threshold amount of money to be able to really purchase the data storage space that they need, and so we're proposing to add $50,000 to IT for capital outlay for this data storage item.
I'm fine.
And just for future reference for that item, This is a multi-year plan, and we broke it up over a number of years. I believe it's 3 or 4 years that Dave Kelly thought would work in order to upgrade the storage now. And so this would be sort of the first installment of that $75,000 that we're proposing. So the next two items are, as I mentioned in the and sent to you as part of the request, and the has to do with Penfield Pavilion and the part-time and seasonal payroll there. And so what we're proposing, based on Anthony and his staff going back and crunching numbers on those hours and the rates, we're proposing that his part-time payroll be reduced by $8,085, and that his seasonal payroll be reduced by $25,265. And so what was it's that budget line item and that org in the budget is not a whole lot of money, but this helps to reduce his proposed increase down to about 6% from where it was.
Yep. And more in line with what's going on with the pavilion and the closure and the et cetera on that, correct?
Exactly, yep.
Yeah.
Okay, there was an item that this came up during our discussions in human resources for ADA compliance. We didn't really have a good explanation for that, so we're taking it out. It was $1,000, so that $1,000 is coming out.
Yep.
The last one that I have to talk about is unemployment compensation. This was one of the items that Selectman Flynn mentioned that came up during our conversation on Friday that he mentioned, and we went back and looked at it. There is definitely some savings that could be created reducing that line at the unemployment compensation. And so we're proposing to reduce that by $100,000. And this is based on what we're seeing our run rate this year and just generally the trends in unemployment at the town.
Yeah, based on our discussions, I don't have any question on this one, Jared. There was before you, I don't know if Nancy does, so I'll be quiet in case Nancy has a question on that.
No, I have just a more broad statement, but go ahead through the questions and then I'll make a point after.
Okay, there was, Jared, I think there was one other on the revenue side. I think there was one adjustment. Were you going to speak to that as well?
There was, yes.
Okay.
Get into that. So in the town clerk's office, recording fees, again, going back and looking at what's happening with sales, home sales, and other activities in the town, we believe that we could add another $50,000 in revenue to recording fees in the town clerk's office.
Got it. Are those are all the kind of adjustments based on our discussions? Is that right?
That's right.
And based on the work, yeah.
And I also, I guess,
talk about, ask about,
could I just make the point that, you know, Tom, you obviously, you brought up something that's kind of, here, I'll start sorry, that's compelling. Because of FOIA issues, we are prevented from talking,
Yeah.
but I think the point is, you know, some of that you bring to this, Tom, an additional wealth of experience and knowledge and historical wisdom. And I think that we would all publicly benefit from the wisdom of that experience, having those conversations publicly. And I know we're bringing it to the light of day now, which is good. And maybe again, this speaks to a bigger philosophical problem, the way the system is set up. that does prevent us from chatting. But, you know, again, I think it speaks to the nature of why we should be having more, you know, that conversation publicly.
So let's, hey Nance, first of all, thanks for the compliments. Let me go through the adjustments that Jared had laid out, just to maybe put your mind at ease a little bit. First of all, the crossing guards one was something that came out during our public discussion.
Yep.
The emergency, the ECC transfer, that was something that Jared and Frank came up with. As was the information technology when they realized that they cut it and didn't have basically the 25 grand that they had put in. They cut too deeply inadvertently, and it wouldn't have done anything this year. The Penfield Pavilion adjustments, both of them, the part-time and the seasonal, those did come out of our discussions, as did the ADA compliance. The one that probably didn't, and Jared just went through it, was the unemployment compensation. And that was truly me just going through and kind of pressure testing it after hearing the budget process and saying, you know, we're looking at a few positions that were eliminated, nothing like what was done a couple of years ago, as well as looking at the trend line. And just really, that's to your point where maybe having some experience here, I brought that up. And then the recording fees, we did discuss that a little bit during our public conversation. And really the discussion that happened afterwards was me talking to Jared and Frank and just basically saying, guys, looking at that, it doesn't seem to jive with some of the other fees and expenses, or rather some of the revenue. Do we have some room there? So really those were the only discussions, just so that you know that it wasn't, you know, kind of some massive thing that happened behind the
Yeah, yeah,
behind the veil.
and I'm also
So
not suggesting nefarious or wrongdoing.
I know you're
I'm
not.
saying
I know
just
you're
the
not.
nature
Yeah.
of the way it's set up is
Mhm.
sort of lends itself to that. So
Yeah, it's
thank you for
frustrating.
clarifying.
Yeah.
Thank you for
No,
clarifying.
yeah, no problem. Thanks. I'm fine with all the adjustments that you guys laid out, and I will defer to my colleagues, but you know, I would be ready to make a motion on these adjustments if they wouldn't do them all in one time, if
That's
that's
what
appropriate.
Yeah, me
Yeah.
too.
All right, so I'll make a motion.
Would you be, so,
I'm sorry,
excuse
Brenda.
me, are you suggesting we take the items that Jared just laid out and that we just discussed as one total
I
adjustment?
am.
Yep.
Okay, very good.
Yeah.
Jared, do you have the total amount of just those items?
We can pull that up.
Okay.
And I think for, at least from based on that, what we used to do at the Board of Finance, I think we actually need to read each of those items just into the record to make sure that we have them right.
Yes, and then I want to just have Jared pull up the total amount so that we have that.
Totally. Yeah. So let me, Madam First Selectwoman, can I read the items to make the motion? And then,
Sure.
and Jared can do the calculation. I'd like to make a motion
Sure.
that we make the following adjustments to the proposed First Selectwoman's budget. Department 1030, which is the town clerk, object code 42311, recording fees. I'd like to increase the revenue in that item by $50,000. On the cost side of the budget, in Department 4030, the police, object code 51120, crossing guards, I'd like to reduce that amount by $159,230. In addition, object code, or rather Department 4150, Emergency Communication Center, object code 58950, transfers out, I'd like to adjust by $28,639 downwards. In Department 3110, Information Technology, object code 57000, capital outlay, would like to increase the expenditure in that by $50,000. In Department 7030, Penfield Pavilion, 51030, part-time payroll, I'd like to reduce that amount by $8,085. And also in that department, 7030 Penfield Pavilion, 51070, seasonal payroll, I'd like to reduce that amount by $25,265. In Human Resources, Department 1330, Object Code 58819, ADA Compliance, I'd like to reduce by $1,000. And in Department 3150, yes, 3150, Unemployment Compensation, Object Code 52510, Unemployment Compensation, I'd like to reduce that amount by $100,000. Those are the adjustments that I would like to make to the budget, and I'll wait for the total from Jared.
So the total amount of net reductions is $272,219. That's the
Sorry.
reductions in expenditures.
Sorry, say it again, 200?
$272,219.
And that's a reduction of expense, and then there's an additional increase in revenue of $50,000 in the same motion, correct? Yeah. And
Correct.
that would be my motion.
And do we have a second?
Yeah, I'll second that.
Is there discussion on this item? Further discussion? Seeing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries unanimously. I'd like to bring up an item. I'd like a motion to add an addition, that money that we just saved, I'd like to add an additional $200,000 to the paving portion of the budget, which would bring it up to $1.2 million. And there's various reasons for this. Obviously, paving is a hot topic among some of our elected officials about how it's paid for, how it's implemented, and such. So I hear loud and clear members who feel that we should be including more additional funding in the actual operating budget. And this would be in line with the stepping up in the operational budget. So last year we had $1 million, and this year we would, if this motion is approved, it would be $1.2 million. And then in line with what I discussed earlier, just as a reminder, the $1.25 million from the ARPA funds, and then my hope that we'll be able to take $1 million out of surplus because it is so high. And then that will lower the amount I would then come to the town bodies with later from $780,000 in bonding down by this $200,000. So this is all, once again, in line with the paving plan that we paid for and that I think is very valuable to getting our roads back in shape 100%. So can I have a motion to increase the paving line by $200,000?
Are you making the motion or asking for a motion?
Oh, can I have a motion? Correct.
I'll so moved. Yep. To add $200,000. Do you want 270,000? Are you looking to do? Sorry, back to the
No, 207. 200.
200.
Okay, so I'll make a motion for $200,000 to add as a line item to the paving.
I'll second that, and that's Department 5030 Public Works, and it's object line 57002 Capital and Asphalt Paving.
Correct.
Yeah, and I second that motion.
Is there any discussion on this item?
I'd just like to recognize the administration doing this. I think this is very consistent with what the town did a number of years ago when we first adopted a paving program. That was probably 10, 12 years ago. And we moved it from the capital budget into the operating budget, and we stair-stepped it over time. So I'm fully supportive of doing the same thing and bringing the town over time to the appropriate level of annual paving in the operating budget. So I'm very much in favor of this.
Yeah, and Brenda, the first selectwoman hit on paving as a challenging issue across board. So I'm in favor of this too. Anything that for me reduces that number that comes to us for bonding. So I'm in favor.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries unanimously. So, we're just looking at the agenda, and I think we kind of went off, and unfortunately Jennifer hasn't been in, and I don't have a printed copy of it, in front of me. So we kind of went offline a little. Jared, what would you like to?
So the motions that were just made were intended to amend item number 6 on the agenda, which is the general fund budget amount.
That's correct.
Would it help if we made a motion to move around the items just for the record?
So I think that would be, yeah, that might be the first step. I don't know if,
Attorney Baldwin?
Yes, I'm here.
Yeah, sorry. I'm glad you're here. I apologize. I should have went in line with the agenda. So how would you, if you are, do you have access to the agenda?
I think I do, yeah.
Do you have a
Or do we just-
recommendation on how we might
Or we
move
just vote
this
again?
in line with the actual agenda?
But we edit the tape. No, I'm kidding.
Well, so just so I understand, you've already made some motions and voted on particular items, but you took them out of order. Is that the issue?
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yes.
but the agenda items were never moved. The only votes that have been taken were essentially amendments to items that, or to one item that hasn't been moved yet. And that's number 6 on the agenda.
Right. Well, I think the simplest way to do it is to just go back and make that motion and then redo the amendment. I mean,
Okay.
As if
So
it
would
hadn't
this be all
happened
the
yet.
items we just,
All right.
or where would they
So-
fall into?
I'd
I
like,
would start with number 6 on the agenda.
So I'm gonna ask, let's withdraw those motions. Can we get a motion to withdraw?
so moved.
So moved. I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, so I'm going to ask for a motion to move up item number 6.
So moved.
I'll
Move it.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, so this is where Jared is saying we should be making all of those motions, that Tom made and then the one I made.
Mr. Baldwin, could we
So-
just refer back to the motions that we made, or do we have to read them all again?
no, I think you can waive the reading of those motions if they've already been made.
I'll make a motion to waive the reading of all the motions.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, so a motion, so you waive the reading. So we have a motion on the floor to make the amendments we previously made to the adjustments of the budget. That is, I think, the first motion under this item, and then we'll take the paving separately.
All right, so moved as per.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And I'll
And
make
then
the,
can I have a
I'll-
motion
I'll
under
waive-
public executive section, a motion to add 200,000 to the paving item under
Yeah.
Public Works?
yeah, I think Nancy, do you want to?
Yeah, and I'll make the motion again as per read before for $200 to add.
200,000.
100,000.
Yeah. Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I have one more motion.
Thank you. And I apologize for that.
Yeah. Since item number 6 is still before us, I have one more motion related to this item, Madam First Selectwoman.
Very good. Sure. Please proceed.
Thanks. In department number 2010, which is the overall contingency for the town, in
Yeah.
object code 58010, which is the contingency line, I'd like to increase the expenditure in that amount by $122,219. Here's why. Number one, it flattens out. It keeps the budget as you presented to a net zero with this. So it's taking the additional savings in this budget and it's throwing it back into the contingency. Now, why would I do that? As came out during our discussions last week, and we have to be careful here is to not speak publicly about any negotiations. We have virtually all of the town's employment contracts, union contracts, in negotiation right now. In addition, recent news has come that one of the unions has filed for arbitration. And therefore, I think it would be prudent to take savings relevant to this budget, giving the low tax impact we've already been able to come up with, and put it towards this amount in the event or this, as this or any other union discussions go differently than the town had intended. So I'd make the motion that we move these quote unquote excess funds that were came about by our adjustments this morning to give us a bit more contingency.
So you're talking now about the 70,000 that remains?
It's actually, when you add, Nance, when you add the increase in the revenue as well on the top side, the amount actually, the exact amount comes to $122,219. And that completely flattens out the impact of all our adjustments to the taxpayers and provides us with that additional cushion in the contingency account.
I appreciate that. I just,
Yeah, go for it.
yeah, I just, I'm looking at other areas, for instance, with the reductions to the Board of Ed budget. I appreciate what you're saying. I
Sure.
just wonder if that's a priority versus, because, I'm going to make motions to restore funding for Board of Ed, and I would just, with that money, I would, where the appetite is. I know the appetite is not, if we're just speaking completely frankly, I know the appetite is not going to be to restore $2 million to the Board of Ed budget.
Right.
I'm going to make that motion, but I know where the appetite is going to be based on discussions that we've had. But I wonder if that $122,000, if we could put that on the table to as a bargaining tool, because maybe just to even offset some of the costs.
Yeah.
So, I'm not going to vote to support this, only because I feel like.
I respect that.
So
I think we need somebody, and I'm just asking one of you, I think we need a second for this, and I appreciate your position, Nancy.
Yeah, no, that's why I'm not seconding it.
Yeah. So.
Second.
Okay. So we can discuss it further if anyone would like, and I understand.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to go into discussion before we had the second, but I wasn't.
Not an issue.
Yep.
So we have a motion on the floor in a second to increase funding to the contingency account in line with in the rationale that I hear. And I just want to articulate that from Selectman Flynn, is that we do have all of our union contracts currently open and will be negotiated. And most will probably fall under this time of this budget time. So I would, I am in agreement with this. To me, this makes sense. Good fiscal sense, being prepared, allowing the town to have that extra cushion in there, depending on how the negotiations go. So that is that's my comment on this item that's before us.
And I guess I would comment, and I'm not in support of this, because I would say just one of the things that I'm thinking about is a majority of the reductions that we're seeing here that we're applying came from crossing guards, for instance, and now that burden is on the Board of Ed budget. So while I appreciate and understand what you're aiming at, I just wanted you to understand why I am not supportive of it.
Okay. If there's no further discussion on this item, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed?
Opposed.
Okay. So the motion carries 2-1. Is there any
So-
other items that the board would like to either bring up to reduce or add during this time under item number 6?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to restore $2 million to the Board of Ed budget. Okay. I'm assuming there's no second there, silence. I'm going to make a second motion, which adds $330,000 based on the additional expenses added to the Board of Ed budget from the town side. So a motion to add $330,000 to the Board of Ed budget. Okay. And I'm going to make one
Could you
final
say the
motion.
item again?
This is to add
Can you say
300.
it again, just so?
Yep, to add, I'm making a motion to add to the Board of Ed budget $330,000, which reflects the amount that the Board of Ed took on from the town side, which includes the crossing guards and the cost of the salt, et cetera, as discussed in our last meeting. So the motion is 330,000 addition to the Board of Ed budget. Okay, and then finally, I'm going to make, yep.
No, I just want to, I just want to be clear about your motion, because my understanding was we kept the crossing guards in our budget inappropriately, because the Board of Ed had budgeted for the crossing guards. This was a discussion that was had, and this was just an accounting error. Our finance department just simply didn't pull it back out. So the Board of Ed had already accounted for this in their budget when they presented it.
I understand.
Just to clarify.
Yeah, they had accounted for it, but it's an additional, for lack of a better word, burden that they're taking on. So I'm just trying to counteract for it and to try to help find ways in which we can give them the Board of Ed in their line items. So I appreciate that it was reflected as an accounting error, but knowing that it was an additional expense that they had to take on, I wanted to make that motion. So.
Okay.
Okay. And then finally, I'm going to make one more motion, which is to put 122,219, which is reflective of the remaining budget reductions to Board of Ed.
122,000 for any specific item?
219 to the Board of Ed, to the line items, you know, again.
It's the
based
same
on-
amount that we just added to contingency.
Correct.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
If any,
You know, listen,
so
I'll second it, Nancy, if you want to have a discussion about it. I want
Sure.
to give you that opportunity.
I appreciate that. And again, philosophically, I wanted to say that I understand there's a lot really good in this budget. And I appreciate all of the hard work that goes into it. I appreciate how much work Brenda, the administration, and how much care goes into this. And, you know, it's reflective of a lot really good 21st century policing. And I love that there's, while I wish it was a full-time position, you know, the HR, you know, diversity position is great. I think adding paving, there is good in it. I'm ultimately not supportive of the budget, and we've talked about this publicly over the past couple of days. I think we rely on the experts, and that's something that we've talked about. And we were presented with a budget from the Board of Education that was reflective of the depth, the wisdom, the experience of our superintendent and the professionals on the Fairfield Public School side, plus with unanimous support from the Board of Ed. And so I just think that the budget that they presented is what they need to effectively care and educate and for the health and safety of our kids. Speaking of that, I want to point out on the operating town side, I think it's great that we're reflecting health and wellness and giving Julie the support that she needs. So, but ultimately, you know, for the reasons I just explained, I'm not supportive of it although I do think there's a lot good in it. I do think that the Board of Ed came up with, and the Fairfield Public Schools came up with a budget that they needed based on experience and really testing the budget. So reducing it by $2 million, I think, will prevent them from doing the best job that they can to give our students our most precious assets, all the tools that they need in their toolbox. So.
No, I appreciate that, Nancy, and I wanted to give you the opportunity to speak on it. And again, like I said on Thursday, after the superintendent presented the school side of the budget, that, you know, these are not easy decisions to make, and there's a lot of competing needs in our town. And I appreciate your positive feedback on the efforts that we did put in. And it is my team has worked very hard. We've all worked very hard to put together a budget we believe makes sense and meets the needs of our residents. And as I said Thursday, I do believe that the funding, the $7.5 million addition to the education budget it shows clearly that we are investing. We are investing in our schools, and it is in line, and it's even higher than the percentage that was given last year. And just to remind that there was a surplus that the Board of Education had after the cut last year, the reduction. And so I have faith in our school system that we'll be able to deliver the services as they have done over the last year with the $7.5 million increase to their operating budget for the year.
I just want to comment that I think some of that surplus, and I could be mistaken, was because they had to reduce some staff. So I think it's not exactly apples to apples, my understanding.
The here's my views on it. The $2 million or $2.5 million, it's right around, you know, and I'm going to use a round number, about 1% of the budget, no more. No, it's around 1%. It's not exact. It's about a $200 million budget or so. The one thing that the discussion does not, and Nancy, I agree with your commentary related to, you know, they've done a thorough job, they've gone through, they're looking for what's best with the kids. I think everybody's looking for what's best to the kids. What's not coming through the budget process right now is the affordability aspect. And it's really, you know, what we need to wrap our minds around is what is the best possible school system that we can afford? And that's what's not coming through. And despite the fact that there's been years of discussion about structural change, we haven't gotten there. It still wasn't given the prioritization that I think it needs to have, given the enrollment levels and giving the pressure, the fiscal pressures that are on the town and that are on our individual taxpayers. And we need to wrap our arms around that as a community and make sure that we're providing the best quality education that we can afford and that the funds are hitting directly into the classroom. And I wasn't convinced in reading through the budget that message had gotten through. And it needs to get through because we're a community of over 60,000, of which only 30%, 35% of the town, including myself, by the way, utilizes the school system. And I do have faith that that reduction can be done with minimal to no impact to the classroom. So thank you. And I appreciate your thoughts, Nancy. Thank you.
And same. I mean, I guess I would say a couple things in response to this, which is 30%, whatever that number is, of people utilize the school system, and yet we all feel the benefits. And right now, in this semester, I am also not having kids enrolled in the school system.
I do.
But,
I do.
And I don't. So, you know,
Yeah.
even that, I'm willing to advocate But I would say, again, philosophically, it's a question of what affordability is and what structural change is. I think we need to have these community conversations because for me, affordability at the detriment of keeping class size small,
Nance,
making sure that there's enough adult support and supervision. That people argue that the best way for a healthy
Nance, I couldn't agree with you
but-
more, and I don't mean to cut you off, but here's the
but
thing.
you are cutting me off.
Go ahead.
Thank you.
No, go ahead.
That meaningful relationships with adults is one of the things that we can do for the kids' mental health. And again, we're not going to solve this problem here, but you are talking about things like structural change and affordability, and I think we really need to understand the semantics of that and what we're talking about, because you might argue that we can't, quote, afford something, and I might counter that with, well, we can't afford the things that we would have to do to get to that dollar because we can't afford to have large classroom size. So again, we're not going to solve this at this table. But to say that we're not addressing, or that the Board of Ed and the Fairfield Public Schools aren't addressing, quote, structural issues is not exactly, again, apples to apples. So,
Hey, Nance.
opinion. Yeah.
I've been talking about that for 5 years, and every year there is an excuse, and it's we'll get to it next year, right? I welcome the discussion on affordability and structural change, but the fact of the matter is we've been trying to have that conversation for years. We've tried to have it. We kicked it off at the Board of Finance long before Brenda was elected. And then as soon as Brenda was elected, it was the first message that she delivered in her first budget cycle. And it never happened. And we kept on saying, and if we go back and look at the tapes of previous Board of Finance meetings, that we can't continue at this rate. And we've continued to say we don't want to get into a situation where we have to make unilateral cuts. I mean, it was the worst case scenario, and we kept on saying it. We kept on saying it and saying it and saying it, and it didn't happen. And I'm not saying that reasons that it didn't happen, there wasn't some validity to them. I'm not ascribing motive or anything like that. But the fact of the matter is, this has been years. This hasn't been 1 year or even 2 years. And we keep on saying, well, we need to define it. We did define it, but it never happens. And it keeps on being put off.
Is it that it's not happening? Because I know the discussions are happening, but again, structural change when you're talking about schools are things like classroom size, and people may not be motivated to make those changes because they don't think it's in the best interest of the kids. So again, I think
Hey,
you could say it hasn't happened, but I think the discussions are happening, and the answer goes back to this idea of affordability. And
well, here's the issue. You bring it up, classroom size, and I know that's not for you and I to debate, right? Classroom size. Here's my issue. Enrollment's been going down for many years, and staff size continues to go up each year. So let's not talk about class size. I mean, if enrollment's going down and staff is either going down or staying similar, then we can talk about class size. But talking about class size and then saying, enrollment continues to go down or has gone down, projections are it's down, and we continue to add staff. I mean, again, it's not for you and I. That's not what our elected office is for.
Sorry.
Yeah, no problem. No problem.
The social emotional health, special ed needs, the needs of the students that are in the schools are changing. And so just to look at it as, oh, we're adding staff. And again, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but it is an interesting debate. But I would say that we should be looking at what staff is being added. Are the kids getting the social emotional support they need at a time when they need it most? Those are things that, we can talk about. But ultimately, philosophically, we're not aligned here today, and we're not going to solve the problem. So I look forward to continuing the conversation.
Yeah, I think you raised an excellent point, and I'll just leave my final comments on this. You're right. We all feel the benefits of a great school system. We also all feel the burden of continued tax increases greater than our growth of our tax base and the ability of our residents to continue to afford and pay those taxes. So that's where I'm coming at it. But I thank you. You're right. You know, but something's got to give.
Can I, because just sorry, one thing I think it's important to acknowledge, because we did get some inbound email collectively, the Board of Selectmen, about special ed and the needs to support. And we talked about this last week. The sped costs are up, and Fairfield Public Schools has had to make some structural change of how instruction is going forward to deliver, to avoid the increasing costs. So I just think it's important to acknowledge too, that with increased demand in terms of special ed, the changes, again, structural, have had to change my understanding to accommodate that. So I wanted to say that for the record, that we're looking at it holistic, or the Fairfield Schools and the Board of Ed is looking at that holistically. So.
Right.
No, and I understand that, Nancy. However, for example, if you look at the fixed costs in any budget, whether it be the town side or the education side, there's a tremendous amount of fixed costs. And so even when I'm developing the budget on the town side, I have to take into account things that I cannot move around or touch. And I believe that the education side does the very same. We have to deliver special ed services. It's the law. So special ed services will not be compromised because that's something we have to do as a matter of law. There are other items in the budget similar to the town side budget that can be adjusted to make up for those increases. And I've had to do that over this now being my third budget, have had to make investments where I think it's critical to the operation of our town. And then I have to reduce in other areas so that I can fund those crucial areas and also those fixed costs. So I know that our school system will continue to deliver special ed services to our students because it's a matter of law. Is there any other discussion on this item? Because we do have a motion and a second.
No.
Okay, very good.
No.
I'm going to ask for a vote. All in favor of Selectwoman Lefkowitz's motion?
Nancy, you're going to want to vote yes.
I did. I'm sorry. I was thinking through what you said was just about the budget. I forgot where we were. Yes, I'm in favor of it. Thank you, Tom.
No problem.
Okay, very good. Opposed? Aye.
Aye.
I literally forgot where we were in the process.
The motion fails 2-1.
Thank you for the discussion.
Sure, absolutely. So if there's no further motions on this item, I am going to make a motion on our item number 6 and amend the dollar amount. So can I get a motion to consider and act upon the proposed revenues and appropriations in the amount, and the number's different than the one you received on your agenda now due to our amendments? $342,772,874 for the general fund of the fiscal year of July 1, 2022 through June 30th, 2023.
342,772. What were the last one?
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
I'll second it.
Is there any discussion on the main motion as amended? Seeing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Opposed.
Motion carries 2-1. Now we will go back to our regular order. Item number 3, public executive session. Just for the public's edification, this requires Board of Finance and RTM approval. As you remember, we break out the different silos of the budget, and we're voting on them separately. To consider and act upon proposed revenues and expenditures in the amount of $6,865,773 for the Water Pollution Control Authority for fiscal year July 1, 2022 through June 30th, 2023. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
I'll second it.
Is there any discussion on this item? Seeing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Item number 4. To consider and act upon, can I get a motion to consider and act upon the proposed revenues and expenditures in the amount of $229,066 for the Fairfield Regional Fire Training School for the fiscal year July 1, 2022 through June 30th, 2023.
So moved.
Second.
Is there any discussion on this item? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Motion carries unanimously. Item number 5, to consider and act upon the proposed revenues and appropriations in the amount of $3,106,754 for the Emergency Communication Centers for fiscal year July 1st, 2022 through June 30th, 2023. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
And I'll second it.
Is there any discussion on this item? Seeing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. All right. Well,
We done?
it looks like.
Thank you.
It looks like we're done. Well,
All
thank
right.
you very much, and
Madam First Selectwoman,
I hope,
before we
thank you, and I
adjourn,
hope you all have, sure, go right ahead.
yeah, sorry. Before we adjourn, I'd like to thank you, your team, for all the hard work on the budget. And I'd also like to thank you and Nancy for our budget hearings. I thought they were very smooth and collegial, as they should be, and I appreciate the discussions. I'd also like to extend my sincere appreciation to the Board of Education, Mr. Cummings and your administration, for your hard work on the budget process. It's not easy for anybody to put a budget together, and I'd just like to acknowledge the work and effort of both your team as well as the Board of Education. And Ms. Vitale, thank you for being part of it.
And if I could also
Thank
take
you.
a moment of, sorry.
Sure, go right ahead, Nancy.
I want to echo that. I think the discussions are good. And while we may not agree, I think hopefully they bring to light new things to consider. I would encourage us to engage just something food for thought for next year. It's been expressed a few times that the daytime slot for the hearings is hard for some working parents to log in. But I want to remind everybody that they still have an opportunity to engage when the budget goes now on to the Board of Finance and then onto the RTM. And so I encourage anyone that wants to participate, still understands that they have time to do so. I want to echo the thanks that I had mentioned earlier. I do think there's a lot good in this budget. And so I just want to wish everyone well, and thank you to you, Brenda, for your work and the administration. Tom, to you for the discussions. And I also just want to take a moment of, if I may, I hope it's appropriate here. I know that there's conflict in the world, and I just want to extend my best wishes to any Ukrainian Americans who are here and we're all praying for peace, I know. And I just wanted to acknowledge that we're thinking about the world stage right now. If we've seen nothing in the last few years, we know how connected we all are as a human global community. So just sending well wishes there.
Very well said. Thank you.
No, I appreciate that, Nancy, and I too will join you in saying that I know I speak on behalf of the residents of our town, thinking a lot as we watch Ukraine fight for its existence, and to see what's happening there is just heartbreaking and atrocious, and I think it brings to light something all of us as Americans to know that we live in the greatest country in the world and that we are safe and we don't have to worry about things that this country or any other country particularly have to deal with. And that's why you're right, we all are in this together. And, you know, what happens there, if we're not careful, could happen anywhere. So, yes, prayers definitely, and great concern, for sure. Okay, well, I do want to thank you both for your time, and I do want to mention, Nancy, you know, about your comment about day hearings. You know, for as long as I can remember, and I go back quite a long time in town government, Board of Selectmen always held their hearings during the day. They just do. And
Something to consider.
As always, people can email, and I think actually the venue in which we've been using because of COVID has made it so much easier for people to actually listen in on these hearings. I actually hope that the charter revision looks a little bit more, because I feel like the process that we have in place now makes it so hard for the average everyday citizen to follow along, because the process is so long and so tedious that, you know, they never really know where the bouncing ball is going, and it changes so much, and there are so many meetings for people to have to follow. And so I do appreciate the emails I have received, both in favor of the budget, some wishing I had an even lower tax rate. Frankly, I got quite a few of those. And then obviously supporting the full amount for the education side. So, you know, I think it's good. Our community is always engaged, and I appreciate that feedback when people want to share it. All right, if we have nothing further, can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Moved. Seconded.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you
Thank
both,
you.
and have a good
Take
day.
care, everybody.
Thank
Take
you.
care now.